All right, so let's go over the activity from yesterday. Class work. Ooh, I already posted for tomorrow's schedule. How cool is that? There we go. Parts and functions. Neuron. Let's go. Neuron activity. Okay. All right. So I know it's flipped around. Sorry about that. But we'll start with number one. What do we got? Number one. What is it? What is number one? Dom, what do you have? Yeah, good job. The Axon Terminals. All right. And what is the job of the Axon Terminal? There's multiple.
Release transmitters into something called the stoma cleft. It's between the next dendrites and those axon terminals, and then that substance will obviously send impulses down the dendrites.
Awesome. Yeah, good job. Good job. So these terminals branch out. They connect to other dendrites of another neuron in order to try to keep this communication going, right? It might be reflex, it might be sensation, whatever it might be, that signal, okay? So the axon terminals, number one, branch out and connect to other dendrites with synapses, which we'll talk about tomorrow with neural communication and how that information is sent to another neuron. Good job. So that's number one, axon terminals. Any questions on that? Good? All right. Okay, two, what do we have? Two. TC, go ahead.
The myelin sheath
Yeah, the myelin sheath. Good job. And what is the role of that? What's the function?
protects the axon and helps carry information faster through the axon.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So the main function is it protects the axon. It protects that axon, that one-way highway that sends information to the axon terminals to another neuron's dendrites. Good. And it's like the outer protection, right? Okay, I related it yesterday to an extension cord. That plastic coating, that rubber coating around an extension cord is a great way to resemble and to reflect what the myelin sheath is and what kind of job it has. Good job. So it's the outer protection. It's like a shield pretty much for the axon. Good. And what's located in the myelin sheath? I know it's not on this graph here. But what do you call it? I know I mentioned it yesterday. Like you said, TC, it helps charge that that signal down the axon. What is that called? Go ahead, Lily.
Nodes of Ranvier.
Yeah, nodes of Ranvier. Good job. Good job. And we already discussed it. It's microscopic spaces in the myelin sheath that helps charge that signal being sent down the axon. Good job. So myelin sheath, protection of the axon. It's that outer layer, and it has microscopic holes within it called nodes of Ranvier that helps charge that electrical signal down the axon. All right, three. What is it, Katie?
The axon.
Yeah, the axon. Good job. And what is the main function of the axon?
It's basically where like the normal impulses are sent and it travels through.
Yeah, good job. So it's that one-way highway, right? It's like pretty much the length of the neuron almost, and it sends information. Where's it getting the information from?
It gets the information from like where the dendrites are in like that area, and then it sends it to the axon terminal.
Yeah, good job. Good job. I'm glad you didn't give away the next one. So yeah, the cell body, the soma, where the nucleus is located, where that information is processed, it receives that information from the soma cell body. Okay, it sends that information to the axon terminals. Good job. Good job. All right, and if you know the axon, that's that long fiber that branches off from the soma. All right, so four, what is it? What is four? Kind of already gave it away. Kinsley?
The cell body.
Yeah, the cell body, the soma. Okay. And within the cell body of the soma is the what, which processes information? Gracie? What is number five? Yeah, the nucleus, right? Good job. So the cell body, the soma, holds the nucleus where that information is stored, okay? And we all know that the axon's connected to the cell body, the soma, where that information can be sent, okay, to the axon terminals. Good. All right, and finally, six. What is it? What's number six? Forney, what do you got?
The dendrite.
Yeah, the dendrites. Good job. And what's the main function of the dendrites?
The receiver part of the neuron that takes this finely branched fibers?
Yeah, good job. So fibers that branch off the soma, the cell body, and their main function is a receiver, right? They receive information from other synapses of axon terminals from another neuron, where that information can be passed and sent to, whether it might be organs, okay, it might be to muscles, okay, it might be sent back to the brain, connection to the inner neurons, right? We all know that. Is there any questions on that, guys? The neuron, the parts and functions of it? We good? Okay. All right, so next week sometime for a vocab quiz. All right. I also have a quiz on a neuron. So maybe expect a neuron quiz early next week. Okay. So study up that neuron. Use the Bowman Show episode tomorrow to help you with that. And yeah, there we go. There we go. So let you guys work on vocab. I'll play a song. How about it? Oh. What song today? What do we think? There we go. SOS. What's up, Alf? Yeah, go ahead. Yep. All right, that's it. Okay, we're going to move on today, talking about how a neuron fires. Not this one. All right, so we talked about the neuron, its parts, its functions, okay, and how the neuron receives information, where it's processed, okay, how it sends information to another neuron, and only different parts and functions of it we know. Okay, so moving on. All right, so we're going to talk about action potential first. All right, so action potential is where that information, okay, when the neuron sends a signal, when a neuron sends information, okay, action potential is released. And this is electrical charge that fires from the soma, right, the nucleus, down the axon to the axon terminals. Okay, that's what action potential is. All right, so action potential is just the firing of a neuron, that information, that signal being sent from the soma, the cell body, the nucleus, right, down to the axon terminals. All right, that's just what that process is called, the firing of a neuron. Okay, action potential. All right, so the action potential is a fire signal the neuron and causes neurotransmitters to be released by the terminal buttons, right? So we'll talk about how other neurons connect to one another through synapses and how neurotransmitters are sent to another neuron, obviously the dendrites, the receiver part, and how that passes on from neuron to neuron. Okay, but action potential, okay, how that information, okay, how that signal is sent from the soma, okay, through the axon to the axon terminals. So if we're relating it to a toilet, how do we think? Actually, no. You guys can do that on your own. You guys can think about it yourself. Okay, and we can talk about it. We can reconvene after you're done figuring that out. All right. So we talked about the myelin sheath already. The nodes are in Veer. Okay, so action potential. All right, so let's start off first with resting potential. Before a neuron fires, it's in its resting state. Okay, it's just resting. It's waiting to be fired. Okay. So the neuron's really only job is to send information from one neuron to another. And with resting potential, that's just the neuron waiting to be fired. Okay, it's waiting to be triggered in order to send information to another neuron. Okay, so in its resting potential, it's just resting. Okay, it's waiting to be fired. Plain and simple. Action potential is when that information is first triggered. Okay, when that information, that the firing of neurons first triggered to be sent down the axon to the next neuron. So a negative balance can be easily upset. However, when the cell becomes excited, triggers an action potential, okay, which is signaling that information, okay, that electrical charge current down the axon to another neuron. That's what action potential is. Which we already mentioned, we talked about. So action potential, sending that information down the neuron to another neuron. But before that happens, all neurons are in a resting state, a resting potential. Okay, they're waiting to be fired. They're waiting to be triggered to send information to another neuron. 1 minute to fill that out. We good? So we got resting potential, waiting to be fired, just resting, waiting to be directed to signal a charge. And we have action potential when that information is being sent from the cell body nucleus, right, down the axon to another neuron. All right, absolute threshold. All right, this is right when the neuron's about to be fired. Okay, right when the neuron's about to be fired. This is the initial movement. Okay, we're going to talk about depolarization here soon. It's very similar. Okay, but this is the first steps of how action potential starts. First, the absolute threshold needs to be triggered, needs to be sent, and that information needs to be triggered in order to send that information to another neuron. Okay, so before action potential can start, the absolute threshold needs to be triggered. The information needs to be really need to be acted on in order to be sent. And this happens obviously in the cell body, the soma, the nucleus. This absolute threshold is triggered. Right, the dendrites just receive the information from another neuron. It needs to be first processed in the nucleus and that cell body, that soma, in order to trigger absolute threshold, in order to try to obviously then send it to action potential. But before absolute threshold happens, we all know it's in its resting state and resting potential. Right? So once resting potential is triggered, that first initial movement is the absolute threshold. The absolute threshold, that first initial movement, the deciding factor to send this information to another neuron. And there's a couple examples in the slide here. So we got the resting potential first, right? Waiting to be fired. Okay, action potential or absolute threshold happens, right? When the information received from a dendrite is processed in the nucleus, the cell body, the soma. Okay, it triggers action potential to be sent down the axon to the other neuron. And once that happens, obviously it needs a recharging period, right? It needs a period in order to try to charge back up, okay, in order to be sent and and able to send information again to another neuron. Okay, it just can't happen automatically, right? In order to send more information or another signal to another neuron, it needs a recharging period or refractory period. So the refractory period, plain and simple, just means a recharging period. Okay, how this neuron's recharging and really just coming to a point where it's ready to be fired again. You guys ever used one of those cameras before? You wind the film in order to take a picture? No? Oh my gosh. Dom, you have? Okay. Yeah, it used to be a big thing back in the day. They were like in vending machines. Like whenever you go to tourist locations, okay, you get the camera, and obviously you take a picture. You got to charge the film back up. Nowadays, you don't need to do that. You just take all the pictures simultaneously. Right? It doesn't need a period to rebuild. Right. So refractory period again is just recharging. Before the neuron can be fired again, it needs to recharge. It needs to rebuild. Okay. You guys got that? All right, good. All or nothing principle. All right, so the all or nothing principle is just really how this information is being sent. It can't be reversed. I spelled principle wrong. I gotta change that. I spell it principle like here. Oh well. I'll go back and change that then. But all or nothing principle is just that information that's being sent. Okay, it can't be reversed. Once that signal is sent down the axon to another neuron, okay, it can't be reversed. It can't be taken back. It's like saying something like in poor standing to someone else. If you say something wrong to someone, you can't really take those words back. Or firing a gun. Once you pull the trigger, once that bullet's out of the chamber, you can't really bring it back. Right? You can't stop it from reaching its destination or where you're pointing at. So the all or nothing principle, once that neuron's fired, there's no going back. You can't stop it. It's going to be fired. Okay, it's going to be sending that information down the axon to another neuron, and you can't reverse it. Like saying something wrong to someone else or shooting a gun. Once it's triggered, once it's in motion, there's no stopping it. You guys good? All right, next one, depolarization. Very similar to what the absolute threshold is. It works along with absolute threshold, but depolarization is just the incoming signal transmission, right, from another neuron receiving in the dendrite, okay, building up in the cell body where the nucleus can process this information and triggering absolute threshold. Okay, as it's being processed through here, it triggers absolute threshold into action potential. That's what depolarization is. So it's that process of receiving information from another neuron being processed by the nucleus, okay, where that is triggering absolute threshold into action potential. So this is the phase right between the resting potential and absolute threshold. Does that make sense? Okay. So as the neuron's waiting to be fired, as it's resting, depolarization is collecting that information from another neuron to be processed in the nucleus to trigger absolute threshold to send into action potential. That's what depolarization is. All right, is there any questions on that, guys? I know we went through a lot of terms there, but I'm going to have this activity posted for you. It should have been posted already. And how you're going to relate it to a toilet. I think it's the easiest way to do it. And it kind of works hand in hand, I think. It's easy to remember it, all these terms and how it relates to a toilet. But anyway, first we got resting potential, right? The neuron's resting, okay? It's waiting to be fired. Okay, then we have depolarization that happens, where that information is received from another neuron, sending to the nucleus to be processed, okay, where it triggers absolute threshold. Okay, once that absolute threshold is triggered, it sends the action potential down the axon, okay, to the axon terminals. And then once that happens, the neuron needs to recharge, it needs to rebuild, the refractory period, right? Okay, and then once refractory period is over, once the neuron recharges, it's ready to be fired again, it is then placed back into resting potential, waiting to be fired. You guys got it? Okay. All right, so the activity I'd like you to work on Google Classroom. There it is. So neurons and toilets, there you go. So with this, I'd like you to define the term, obviously. Okay, and then just give an example how it relates to a toilet, each part. Sound good? So I'll let you guys work on that, think it over, and we'll discuss it maybe at the end of the period or tomorrow. Okay? Sound good? All right. They're working on it. They're working on it. It's due tomorrow, so maybe I'll just give you time today to work on it. We'll go over it tomorrow before the podcast. What do you think, Rooster?